Climate financing definitely comes with a huge burden of financing, because when you look at the big picture, the funding deficit is standing at about 2 trillion US dollars. And this is amounts of resources that is not quite easy for African countries to be able to mobilize this. What is at stake for countries that are not able to access funding?
Let me stress that unless during this decade we are successful to move trillions of dollars into emerging markets in developing countries, including in Africa, for low carbon climate resilient growth, we will fail our Paris Agreement commitments. We will not be able to sustain the increase in average global temperature to 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. Why? Because these are the economies that are growing. Their population is growing, their demand for energy is growing. Unless they are able to rapidly shift their trajectory to renewable energy, energy efficiency, and also to investment in protecting agriculture against the hits of climate shocks, protecting people against climate disasters, we would be in a very bad place as a world, not just as Africa. At the IMF, we have seen this as a reason to move very swiftly on the creation of the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. Within one short year, we turned a dream into reality, operational reality. Already 4 countries have accessed the RST. And our main objective is to take this 40 billion and multiply their impact by a factor of at least 4, 5, by creating conditions for private investment to go into developing countries. Why is this not happening? Well, it is not happening, one, because of perceived and real risk. I have talked to many private investors. They say, we have the money, we have tons of liquidity, but we don't dare go into risky markets. What they expect is for us to help countries in Africa create more predictable conditions for private investment, but more importantly, bring into place instruments that reduce risk, first loss guarantee, or using blended finance on scale. That must happen in this decade, not in some faraway future.
Quite a lot of work for the IMF indeed. And let's shift gears a bit, Madam Kristalina, because another very touchy point right now is really looking at the growth focus. We are seeing global growth below 3%, and this will have devastating effects for 2023. Are you worried about the underlying issues that are continuing to ravage quite a number of economies, what has been termed as the polycrisis, and is Africa prepared to come out of it?
We are concerned about the status of the world economy. We are going to see growth slowing down in 2023 vis-a-vis where it was in 2022, and it wasn't a very high last year. Why we are concerned? First, because inflation that has been triggered by COVID and then on top of it, Russia's war in Ukraine, is demanding from central banks to tighten financial conditions, increase interest rates. That is going to last through 2023. Yes, inflation is starting to go down, but not fast enough for central banks to step back, to take their foot off the brake they have pressed. The second reason we are concerned is because we don't quite know how the Chinese economy is going to come back after they have eased COVID restrictions. Yeah. How fast, how effective. And the third reason we are worried is the unknown. What we learned in these last years is that the unthinkable can happen. COVID, unthinkable. Yeah. It happened. War in Europe, unthinkable. It happened. So what does that mean for Africa? Well, Africa is growing somewhat above the global average, but way below its potential. We are projecting below 4% growth for Africa, and you know it. For the young people of Africa, we need 6, 7, 8%, 10% growth. And what I would urge African countries to do is please focus on strong governance, strong fundamentals, because the only way to cope with this polycrisis is to build resilience to shocks through the performance of institutions. Look at Rwanda. Rwanda is growing above African average, and one of the reasons it is more attractive to private capital and more effective in growth is rule of law.
And when you look at this very convoluted kind of graph that we are seeing, especially for African countries, the same countries are dealing with the debt crisis. They have exhausted their fiscal space and they can't really take in more debt. What is your message to central bankers, finance ministers? How do they navigate through the storms?
The central bankers in Africa, unfortunately, have to do what central bankers do in advanced economies, cool down inflation. And that means that they also have to be very careful with the conditions they provide. We know that it is not an easy task. So what can they do? Given the fact that in addition to what hits advanced economies, they also suffer the consequences of the high interest rates of the Fed, of the European Central Bank, and the impact of devaluation of their currencies. What they need to do is to focus spending to priority areas. It is not easy, but it must be done, and continue their strive to increase revenues. We have seen some countries doing exactly that, being more prudent in tax collection. When tax collection is above 15% of GDP, that provides a better condition for meeting the obligations of the state. I also see the issue of debt as one that is a responsibility of African countries, but it is also international responsibility. As you know, the G20 adopted the common framework. It has been slow to produce results, but we finally see some. Chad has been resolved. Zambia is making good progress. Ghana has asked for treatment, and I do expect rapid advancement in the case of Ghana. What we need to do, we, the international financial institutions, overall the global community, is to make sure that debt resolution happens more quickly. So we protect not only the countries that are currently suffering under the burden of unbearable debt, but we protect the risk of spillover to other countries.
And quite interestingly, as we wrap it up, Rwanda and other economies within East Africa, Kenya to be precise, have of course been pursuing an aggressive approach towards tightening fiscal policy. And what is your view, especially for Kenya, which at one point in time, the IMF had raised the alarm saying that the country was tinkering on debt default. What is the situation at the moment?
I think that Kenya, the new government in Kenya, the new president and his administration are taking a very careful look at prudency in macroeconomic policy. Look, if you go back to the beginning of the pandemic, what do you find? People with strong immune systems, they don't get sick as much, and if they get sick, very unlikely to die. Economies with strong fundamentals, they withstand shocks much better. What Kenya is doing now is to say, okay, we want to be a country with strong fundamentals, and we wholeheartedly support this approach. Thinking of medium-term fiscal consolidation when you are coming from a period of time when, for no fault of your own, because of COVID and the war, US government had to spend more. This is the way to go. Think about how you're going to climb out of where you find yourself because of these exogenous factors. We at the IMF have sent a very strong message at the beginning of the pandemic to governments. Spend, but keep the receipts. Be accountable for what you spend. Now we are telling governments, think about your resilience, strengthen your fundamentals, especially your fiscal position.
Your parting shot to the African leaders.
Africa has an enormous potential. We all know it. The African leaders in this moment of time bear the responsibility to realize this potential. And we have learned through history that a country that has been poor becomes rich with three things in place: high quality education, high quality infrastructure, and rule of law. So African leaders have the chance now to deliver this recipe for success as they come out of the shocks we all have lived through over the last years.